First of all, I want to thank you, the Asset Leadership Network, Jack Dempsey, Jim Dieter, and especially Admiral Allen for that really great talk. So interesting to hear about his background in the Coast Guard, learning from mistakes, working to mission support. And I really appreciated his emphasis on transparency and how that leads to accountability and self correction. And transparency and accountability are two bywords that we are really trying to live by here in real property asset management on the domestic side of the State Department. We've been doing a lot of soul searching and trying to do some self correction. And I'm excited to talk to you about it this morning.
Yes.
So I've been a little over 20 years and really pleased to have landed here in the last few years.
Yes, the work that you're doing there is why we're so grateful that you're joining us. Our theme this year is Restructuring America, Building on Success, and the success that you're going to be sharing is what we want other agencies and other organizations to be building on.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So I came to AOPR, which is what we call the Bureau of Administration, Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Operations, just a couple years ago. Super interested to hear Admiral Allen talk about the cybersecurity challenges in asset management. In my previous job, I ran the National and Nuclear Risk Reduction Center, which is a co-project of state and DoD. And cybersecurity on those networks was an urgent and ongoing concern. And we did a lot of work with security and asset management over there. So really natural progression for me in some ways to come to AOPR, where we're focused on asset management of domestic real property issues. So the Bureau of Administration at State handles a variety of assets, real property, personal property, vehicles, aircraft, all the things you would expect from a very large department at the federal level. Particularly AOPR handles domestic real property. People are often surprised to realize that there's a domestic aspect to real property at State because they tend to think of our embassies overseas. And you'll hear more about that from my colleagues in the sister organization overseas building operations in just a little bit. But domestically, State has over 150 locations that we operate out of. This is a variety of locations with functions like security, training, local consular bureaus where folks can go for passport assistance, visa assistance, field offices for diplomatic security, training facilities for foreign affairs, regional centers, data centers, our US UN, US United Nations areas. So there's really a very wide variety of properties that we're dealing with domestically that house about 37,000 staff writ large. So here in OPR, we have a little over 250 direct employees plus contractors. We handle a smaller dollar value portfolio in part because we split what we're doing to things that we are coping with directly. We're directly overseeing design, construction, leasing, procurement, A&E studies, engineering studies, and so forth. Vice things that we are coordinating with GSA on. And domestically, of course, GSA is the single real property manager writ large for the nation. So that's the kind of portfolio we're looking at. Many leased facilities, commercial leases through GSA, of some federal buildings that we rent from GSA, a few important campuses or facilities that the State Department owns directly in one way or another. So we're juggling a variety of authorities and a diverse portfolio. And a number of years ago, we started to really look at asset management in a structured way building on the kinds of guidance we were getting from OMB and GSA and executive orders, and started to really look at the industry to say, where do we match up here? And I appreciate you introducing and saying State Department was doing a terrific job at a very high level. We don't think that we're over in OPR that we're at a very high level so far, but we spend a lot of time looking in the mirror trying to learn from our mistakes. So if I can have the next slide, please. As we looked at our current state a number of years ago, we found a number of aspects that concerned us. And in the spirit of transparency, I'll tell you that we found that there was a certain amount of decision-making on real property that was really ad hoc or personality-driven decision-making about what sorts of procurements we would make, or where we would house particular functions. And we really looked at the mantra that we got from OMB to get the right facilities in the right locations at the right times in the right condition, and said, are we really doing that well? As we were looking at decision factors, we saw that although we could do some analysis of total cost of ownership for the entire portfolio, it was limited, and we needed better data. And we needed better analytical capability on that data. And then when we looked at the exact kind of analysis we could do, we saw that, for example, there was no scale of per person spend for housing particular functions. And the density of occupancy, which, as you know, is a national concern for real property at the federal level, was really more determined by those personalities that were involved at any point in decision making, rather than the function, and looking at how that function needed to be best supported to get the mission done. So our future desired state was to look at quantified performance criteria to measure our justifications for dollar spends. As Admiral Allen said, there are scarce resources, and we need to be most effectively managing them in order to have best mission support. We needed to have some analytic tools that were easily adaptable. We needed to have industry standard equations that we used to measure total cost of ownership of various options for real property management, so that we could present them to the highest department leadership and OMB and GSA and Congress to really make the best decisions. And as we talked to our customers, the other bureaus at State Department who we support, we wanted to be able to engage them on what the total spend per person was. And we wanted to look at the kind of financial vehicles that we had for executing real property asset management. And we thought that a working capital fund was really the best way to move forward for several reasons that I'll talk about during the presentation. And we do have, with our FY 2023 proposal for State Department, a proposal for a working capital fund for a variety of aspects of what we're doing. So that was our desired output. So how to get from current state to future state was the challenge we were looking at. So we looked at ISO 55000 on real property asset management as a framework that we could pull from, not necessarily to try to get certified as ISO 55000 compliant, but as a framework to try to structure our approach to improvement. It gave us a great set of tasks to check against to see if we had determined whether that task applied to us and how well we were doing it. So kind of a maturity model that we could look at, but trying to make it work for us to best support our mission. So the philosophy that we came up with was to implement a comprehensive and holistic RPAM program, real property asset management, to support the mission, take care of our employees, and to optimize our assets across their life cycle. So make the best procurement decisions, take care of facilities while we're using them, decommission them at the appropriate time if needed, or strategically recapitalize them. So in terms of implementing a holistic RPAM program, this year, we really focused on analyzing our portfolio value in terms of the risk to mission. What's the status of these facilities? Where are we most at risk in terms of deferred maintenance and repair, which is what we ended up focusing a lot of time on this year, and to use that risk to mission analysis to develop a budget prioritization process. We also spent some time every year trying to develop our employees, provide them with some training opportunities for crosswalking, sharing value across our human resources, breaking down those stovepipes that Admiral Allen talked about, really breaking down the barriers in communication internally within OPR, and then trying to work with others like our colleagues in overseas building operations, our colleagues at GSA, our budget and planning folks, our other customers, and so forth, working to optimize the way we take care of our facilities, optimize our Department of State assets. Good morning, Keith. I see that Keith Hannigan is on as well. So looking to optimize our maintenance delivery, on deferred maintenance and repair, most especially, optimizing our project delivery for small, medium, and large construction and renovation projects, looking at how we do space management, which particularly in an era of teleworking and hoteling is becoming increasingly important at state, and looking to the future and how we optimize lease management as leases come due for renewal. This year, we focused quite a bit on Objective 1 and 3, implementing that holistic program, doing some key asset master planning, and Objective 3, which was optimizing our Department of State real property domestic assets, in terms of implementing a CMMS program, how we manage repairs, PMs, and so forth, and implementing our space and real property data management as well, our IWMS program. And trying to use all the data that we gathered to put forward some key asset master planning, a housing framework nationwide, and an action program to brief up to incoming State Department leadership to try to get buy-in for that. Facility condition assessments were a big push for us this year. With 150 plus facilities nationwide, we focused in on our priority facilities and doing a complete comprehensive facility condition assessment, which we just completed last month. We looked at over 25,000 separate components at about 24 facilities nationwide, the 24 that we have a direct delegation or ownership of. We conducted this really detailed system level evaluation of the inventory and the condition of every bit of those systems. And we identified in detail almost $260 million in deferred maintenance costs, and put that together with a risk matrix about the risk to mission of the condition of various components. This also involved distinguishing between the responsibility for the systems that lay with State Department and the responsibility that lay with GSA. And that is something that we're sharing with our GSA colleagues. They don't always have they rely on us, I would say, for it to a large degree for details about the buildings which they own, but we have delegation for. So it was great to get a really detailed look at that. Our condition indices are being formatted into deep dives for our next budget assessment and being shared with our budget and planning folks. We're busy revalidating the present replacement value of all of our facility stock. and putting all of this information into our computerized maintenance management system, our CMMS system. And we use one of the industry standards, Maximo, for this. So I would really want to call out some of the change management that happens as we look forward to doing these things in the future. So with a clear-eyed view and looking in the mirror, we can say, hey, we didn't have great SOPs for how to do this. We had to make a big push. We had to develop an SOP, and doing a one-time SOP and push are not nearly the same as developing a culture of doing this annually, cyclically, making sure that you're crosswalking the data across all of our facilities and getting our facility managers together to ensure that when they assess the condition, they're doing it in a very standardized way. So we still got some work to do there. We're pretty proud of what we managed to get done, and we know what some of the next steps are that we want to work on. And a lot of them are about culture change, so that we can ensure that we build on what we've done, not have to repeat the same thing a number of years from now. Can I have the next slide, please, Mike? Thank you so much. So from these facility condition assessments and some of the other work that we've done in prior years, what we wanted to do was come up with one complete mapping of one of our facilities. So we chose a key data site location that we have in Denver, Colorado, that handles a lot of our enterprise-wide data networks, and really drilled down from soup to nuts on that piece of real property, bringing together a variety of people across our entire enterprise to look at the template for an asset management plan. How we own it, who we share responsibility with, who are the neighbors, what is the water table management there, what is the deferred maintenance, what kinds of life cycle issues are we looking at there. So we created a template to gather all of this information and to have a review of it that we're then replicating across our portfolio. One of the key findings of doing that study was that since we acquired that site, we believe that we have underfunded the maintenance of it by about $1.5 million per year, which is about 30% of what's needed for that site, which means that we continue to have a delta between the condition of the site, the actual condition, and the ideal condition of the site, which, as you can see in the graphs below, we're trying to show that increases the cost over time considerably, because every year the delta gets wider and the performance goes down and the risk goes up of failure to mission. So this was an exercise for us in both doing this broad scale study and trying to figure out whether our actuals, as best as we could determine them, were able to be compared to industry parametric estimates of the level of performance of those facilities over time. So the level of service versus the resources needed, but also how are we looking compared to industry parametrics. It came as a no shock to us, really, that we were a little bit, well, we could use parametrics fairly well to estimate the risk to mission, but it's always better when you've got actuals in your pocket, because that's the kind of data that leadership really wants. So we can use some parametrics across the portfolio as we continue to mature our data. All right, can I have the next slide? Thank you. So master planning. On the other side, I would say, of our portfolio, we've got the facility management side that I just talked about, facilities you have, what is their condition, and so forth. We also wanted to look at the broader picture of what kind of facilities do we need? And is that what we have right now? And if not, how do we get to where we need? So in order to do this, we needed to engage with our customers across the board to revalidate what their needs are and to develop an investment strategy to support those needs. So what we ended up doing was putting together a set of interviews with every bureau in the State Department to talk about the lessons they've learned from the pandemic, for example, what their future intent is in terms of telework, what kind of personnel bumps they might be looking at, changes to the mission space, etc., and really using those interviews to derive what our master housing plan should be. Can I have the next slide, please? I think we've gone a little bit out of order. I'm going to actually skip past this slide, which talks more about how we're using Maximo and what our data strategy is there. And in the interest of time, continue talking about our master housing strategy. So we brought in some new software to do an IWMS system. We're bringing in Archibus, which will replace our older legacy system. Our older legacy system doesn't give us all the data that we need to meet OMB mandates for data calls or to meet our need for quick and flexible responses to emerging mission needs. So, for example, I'll tell you when the pandemic first started and we were evacuating folks out of Wuhan, China, remember, cast your mind back almost 2 years to that point, we got a phone call that we would be evacuating 300 folks, and could we please figure out where we could seat those folks in the Washington, D.C. area in our current facilities. We did not have that data easily to hand of where there were vacant workspaces that could fit that number of people. So what emerged was some pretty quick brainstorming on where we could put them. And what I would rather be able to do is turn to some real data and say, here's where all the vacant workspaces are, and here's the best configuration to meet this mission on a very quick turnaround. So Archibus is a software that enables us to see where our workspace is after we put in floor plans and match that to actual staffing. We're going to be able to use this to manage hoteling across State Department. We're looking at how we can reconfigure spaces by looking at the mission need and adjacencies and getting scenarios out of Archibus. So we're executing a 5-year roadmap to fully implement Archibus. It has modules on sustainability, which is a key need for us as well. There's a whole variety of modules. And we are in the initial stages of putting in all of the data that we need and getting some great results from this. So workspace booking is something that I think folks at State Department are starting to really associate with Archibus. It's a key need. It's kind of the tip of the iceberg from a real property standpoint, but from a customer viewpoint, I think the ability of Archibus to support enterprise level hoteling is very important. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is just a little bit more about some of the key achievements that we've managed in Archibus. We've managed to identify change agents, change champions in a number of bureaus who are going to help us with piloting the hoteling project. That pilot started this fall, just a couple of months ago. We have bureaus calling us all the time to figure out how they can get in on the pilot. So we have a very aggressive effort right now to try to identify funding that can help us accelerate this. We've done training sessions, listening sessions. We're setting up some on-demand training. We've got feedback coming in on how this is being used at the moment and how bureaus would like to use it in the future. So our initial pilot involved 6 bureaus and another 8 organizations within State Department with 214 pilot users. And pretty soon we'll be moving on to phase 2 of that pilot. Another aspect of master planning that we worked a lot on this year is to figure out what our framework should be, our decision framework for housing particular functions. This is very difficult when you have an organization that is in motion all the time, right? Which is all of our organizations. We have a kind of prioritization that we want to set up that will help us easily decide when a new mission comes in to a bureau, what is the optimal location for that mission. We have a headquarters building, which may seem large, but it is not compared to the number of folks who want to be in it. And I think we probably all share that view of how we're managing our resources, right? So the pyramid that we're trying to set up here on a decision matrix is who goes into the headquarters building at State Department, who would be in other areas in Washington, D.C., in the Foggy Bottom area primarily, but we have some facilities in other places right in the district, who would be across the river from us, as we say, in Roslyn or other places in Arlington, who would be a little bit farther out in Northern Virginia, and who would be in other domestic regions, Charleston, North Carolina, Florida, Denver, as we've talked about. We have all kinds of facilities across the United States. So the first thing we wanted to do was develop a decision framework and brief it to department leadership so that when a bureau comes to us and says, we have this very important mission that we started up, or we're expanding this mission with another 50 people, can you please find us space? We can say, where does that mission fit in this framework mapping to a particular area? And that's where we'll try to find location for you. We have a little bit of underutilized space in the National Capital Region, but really we need to optimize NCR space considerably through densification. Fortunately, the State Department's moving toward a hybrid workforce, which helps us with densification. We also have an upcoming major modernization of our headquarters building, and that is going to entail swinging out some of our folks in the headquarters building in order to make space and putting other folks on nearly full-time telework. So that's going to be happening in the next 5 years in coordination with GSA, and we need to figure out what the feasibility is of moving folks into other space in DC or Arlington or Northern Virginia or even elsewhere in order to support that. As we went through a mapping of master housing needs over the next 5 years, we also looked at lease expirations and whether it was feasible to reduce any of our lease holdings based on a hybrid workforce posture and densifying in the NCR. And we've determined that it's possible to reduce the department's rent by $40 million per year within the next 5 years if leadership buys into our plan. So that is still in process, and I look forward to reporting out on what the result is of that. It'd be pretty exciting if we can actually manage to do that. $40 million is a fairly significant amount for State Department in terms of our domestic leasing. Thanks very much for the next slide, Mike. So just to sum up, kind of telling you what I've told you, we conducted an RPAM program assessment several years ago and developed a strategic plan. And we have been working on that, on implementing that strategic plan over the past few years. This year's progress involved a comprehensive facility condition assessment, mapping that to a risk strategy, and mapping that to actual budget needed in order to take care of the top priority risks over the next 5 years. We implemented a proof of concept on how to integrate that into our CMMS system. And we implemented a new IT program for our IWMS needs and completed an asset management plan for a large data hub in Denver, which we're then replicating across our portfolio. And in the process of gathering that data and putting it into our IWMS, we've come up with some master housing strategies that we're briefing to leadership in the hopes that they accept our proposals, which we think are comprehensive, holistic, accountable proposals for how to deal with scarce resources most effectively and get the best value over a lifetime of assets for the State Department. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, so what are our continuing challenges? And believe me, we have plenty of them. We are going to continue the work that we're doing. Next year, we're looking at hopefully implementing a working capital fund. Some of the key problems that we realized we were having were trying to do multi-year construction on single-year funding. We don't have on the domestic side of State Department's real property a funding mechanism that is a 2-year, 5-year, or no-year funding mechanism. And trying to do non-severable construction projects with single-year appropriations was an ongoing challenge. So we've put together a proposal for a working capital fund that we hope will start in next fiscal year. That working capital fund would cover construction and renovation issues, and it would also cover facilities management issues. The deferred maintenance and other kinds of O&M that we need to cover. So we're hoping that that works, and if it works, that will be a large change indeed in the way State Department does business domestically. I'd note that our overseas colleagues do have a working capital fund for these kinds of things, and so we're just trying to mimic their best practices over in OBO by putting together what we think of as a domestic version of ICAS, which is the working capital fund for these things overseas. Change management, absolutely. The entrenched culture that we've built domestically on these issues requires continued work with incremental changes. Last year, we did training on real property asset management. This year, we did some leadership training on change management and customer service, and trying to think through how we hold ourselves accountable and look for transparency in our organization. So we're really trying to do enterprise-wide training in our AOPR culture. We are working on our human resources issues. We have, as many folks across the US government, a demographic issue of baby boomer retirement. We've got a lot of folks who've decided that with the course of the pandemic, they've had the ability to look at what they would do if they retired and thought it was a great idea. So we have a lot of people retiring, and that has led to some gaps, which we're trying to fill in the most expeditious way possible. Also working with the folks that are here to help them look more at the skills that they might want to develop and give them access to training opportunities that will help them, and pay for certifications and training to help them be the best possible stewards of our real property. As you saw, we're working with a lot of IT changes. We have some great stakeholders at the department here, OBO, diplomatic security, our IT folks that we call information resource management, who all have their own asset management challenges, and we're trying to work with them to put the best minds possible on how to be collaborative and transparent with the data that we're getting on real property, so that we can share it with these bureaus and develop a one-state approach toward real property asset management. And then finally, I've talked a bit about our partnership with GSA. That is a partnership that has, I think, grown better and stronger over the past few years as we've sought more transparency and accountability for ourselves. We're looking at the authorities that we do have at State Department domestically for ownership and construction, and trying to determine what's the best level of use of those authorities and what areas are best continue to work in partnership with GSA. And that was my last slide. So I am delighted to talk to folks today. I'm happy to take questions, and I'd be delighted to be joined by OBO colleagues if you like as well for questions about this.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive look at the considerable steps that you are taking. And Keith presented last year and indicated what was happening, but you've detailed it very well. And the interaction that you're doing, the piloting, the rolling out, the use of ISO 55000 as a structure is advanced. We're still at the leading edge of all this. So thank you for sharing what you're doing. That's going to be very helpful. And we do have questions, but I would like to see if Keith is still around, and if he is, he can join. But I also wanted to say that the use of ISO 55000 and its mission-focused approach that Admiral Allen mentioned, and he had done without ISO 55000, well, that's what's helping you get rid of some of the personality-driven decision-making, and that mission-focused approach that he pioneered and is now incorporated into ISO 55000, which is just a common sense document. So of course, many of the things that Admiral Allen had initiated are going to end up in that structure. So that is pretty advanced. So one of the questions, are you using Builder or other commercial product to perform condition assessment?
Thanks. We're not using Builder. What we're using is, what we're putting together, I would say, a data platform that uses Maximo as the CMMS and Archibus as the IWMS, right? So the real property ownership, long-term housing plan, et cetera, through Archibus, and the Maximo for facility management. And then together, there's a kind of back end that helps us with business insight and analysis. But not Builder. On the domestic side, we have less need for that than OBO, which I think is looking at Builder.
Yes, and we heard from the Air Force yesterday, they're using Builder. So there's other federal agencies, obviously, that are using that. And there's a question about culture. Have you found that cultural transformation is something that blocks effective, efficient implementation of asset management? And have you found that asset management is something not inherent to the position descriptions of established personnel?
That is such a great question. I mean, culture change is really hard. And folks tend to perceive culture change, desired culture change, as meaning that they are not doing a good job, right? So people perceive it in a very defensive way. So our challenge, I think, as senior leaders is trying to say, listen, you're doing a great job, right? Here are things that you're doing that are great. Here are some things that, we have to be honest and look in the mirror and say, we're not quite hitting the mark on this. how can we over time come closer and closer to this particular mark, which is maybe a mark you've never been asked to hit before. I find that asset management is inherent to the position descriptions that we have, but it's not a muscle that we've always exercised or exercised in exactly the way that we're asking people to do right now. When we think about, for example, what's our strategy on PMs, right? On preventative maintenance. Older style, you're going to have a guy with a dry erase board, right? You're going to have some graph paper and you're going to figure it out. You're going to have a notebook that you've kept over a number of years. Newer style, you're going to put that into a database and you're going to kind of put into digital form the things that are probably in a facility manager's head, right? So at the facility manager level, these guys, they know their facilities, they know what the risks are, they know where the money needs to be spent, but making that explicit, putting it into data, and then being able to capture data across all of our facility managers and turn it into analysis that our senior leaders can easily see and easily transform to best answer their questions and make their decisions. That's a new muscle, right? That's something that you have to show the power of doing that in order for people to feel like, yes, that is an impetus to change that I can buy into. And yes, it's going to require some different activities of me in order to contribute to that, but I'm going to get back from that prioritized funding for the top needs that I've made the best case for.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got two comments from the ALN perspective. We're working to see how to create an asset manager job category for the federal government. And then that would have a requirements for training and advancements and other things. So asset management has been around since the pyramids or before the pyramids. It's just that with this new approach called ISO 55000, there's a global consensus on the many things, common sense things to do. And Jack Kelly, who's one of our board members and was with OMB for 36 years, says, this is the first time I've seen anything that has all of the common sense things in one document. So this is kind of a new era of asset management because of that. And one of the items in it is continuous improvement. So it's kind of built in. That's part of the thing that gets rid of those personalities and culture issue. You're doing a great job. Now look at this. It says, how are you going to improve? Tell us how you're going to improve. And it kind of burns through a lot of that personality issue. And if Keith Hannigan is available, we'd love him to come in.
I just saw him.
Yes,
I'm here. So Mike, yeah, thanks so much. So what, it's great. It's the last time when I was here doing this last year, you kind of got what was the state of play then, what were some of our aspirations. And so this time you get the real brains of the operation and somebody who is a far better public speaker than I to kind of give you the down and dirty on where we are. And it's exciting, right? To us, it feels like it's moving like a glacier when you actually start to write out these presentations and look at all the things that we've done and the movement that we've had. You're thinking, okay, I guess we are getting someplace. So I thought Deborah just did an amazing job of kind of encapsulating everything that we're doing. I think the culture is a great topic. It's probably our number one challenge, right? Because as Deborah said, the inclination when you change is that you did something wrong or change is bad, right? The reality is that we should always be changing, quite frankly, especially in the industry that we're in. And we should be lifelong learners and we should be curious, right? And if we have those things, I think complacency is one of the things we just have to be wary of, right? We all kind of get in these ruts, but we should never be comfortable where we are, right? There's always room for improvement. So I think this notion of continuous improvement and measuring that delta is so important, and it can help to change and motivate our teams, right? And
Yes.
give them that training, that outward mindset training that Deborah mentioned was illuminating for all of us, right? At every level in the organization, everybody walked away, you know, a little more knowledgeable, a little more open, you know, to other perspectives. So it was really important. So, Mike, I just want to thank you and Ellen for putting these on, and for all the speakers on this. It's every time I come to one of these, I learn a whole bunch, and I'm copiously taking notes about things that I should be doing better.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's good to know that our intended audience is getting value. That's a good level of measurement. And I think I'm going to share something that's not a question, but Chris says, as a former FSO, thank you for all this work, Deborah. FSI is a beautiful campus. Glad to hear a large renovation is coming to Maine State. You are setting a high bar for asset management. So that's what I was saying earlier, is that you are, you know, being leaders. It might not seem, everybody looks at themselves and thinks that, oh, there's, you know, so much more I can do. But by sharing what you are doing, it's very helpful to everyone.
Oh, well, thanks, Chris, and thanks for mentioning FSI. The Foreign Service Institute is really a jewel of the State Department. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus in Arlington. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are building a large new building there, bigger than most of our chanceries overseas. It is the first time that AOPR has directly managed greenfield construction for the department. Usually we go through GSA for that. And the building looks terrific. And we also are getting help from our OBO colleagues. We borrowed somebody from OBO to help us with construction management there. And he's doing an amazing job, amazing senior foreign service officer, construction engineer. So that's a great partnership, I think, within state and with GSA as well, who allowed us to do that.
Excellent. So there's a question from Tom about how are you looking at what GSA does versus what you may do now that you're having, you know, these new tools and processes in place.
Right. So one thing we realized was we were not being as, I would say, informative as we could be with GSA. They have a budget process every year where they're asking for funds from the Federal Buildings Fund, right? They call it their BA 54 and 55 process. They're kind of smaller projects and large capital investment projects. And we had been giving them sort of a wish list every year of 3, 4, maybe 5 activities that we thought were needed. Well, we identified, I mean, well over $150 million worth of deferred maintenance and repair needed on these buildings. That is GSA's responsibility. So we need to do a better job of really delineating for them what the condition is of buildings that we are renting. These are federal buildings that we're talking about, right? Not the commercial buildings and so forth. Yes. On the leasing side, boy, I would say that as we looked into leasing and the portfolio, love GSA. I mean, GSA pushes us to do more planning